it's well, good, I guess, night, good evening. I don't where does the cutoff between evening and night? That's an interesting question. Whatever time you're watching this in, greetings. I'm Jacob Winograd. I'm the host of the Biblical Anarchy podcast here at the Libertarian Christian Institute, part of our Christians for Liberty network. And I'm here tonight with my friend Jeremiah Harding. Jeremiah is returning to the show for, fourth time, fifth time? I've
Yeah.
lost count. You've been on a few times.
I'm like a fungus. I stick to objects and then spread.
Yeah, well, I mean, not all fungus is bad. I mean, penicillin and other molds are good for you, I suppose.
Can be.
So
You shouldn't take penicillin unless you absolutely have to, though. The microbiome is needed.
that is true. That is true. I mean, I think about this is totally a tangent, but like when I was growing up, I used to try to play hooky from school by saying I was sick, and so my parents would take me to the doctor a lot. And the doctors back then were just like, "Oh, we'll give you antibiotics." I shudder now knowing what I know about gut health and stuff like that, about how many needless antibiotics I took as a child. But that's a different conversation for another day. We're here to talk about a different sort of, invasive
Yep.
species that comes in and wreaks havoc on the natural order and health and ecosystem of not just a human person, but of the entire, I guess, world, not just the nation, the world. But we're here to talk about the man in the White House, the Donald J. Trump himself. I think most people know. Probably, I think actually, the last time you were on is when you and I had uh, a heated but friendly debate, moderated by Hody, uh, on whether or not it was worthwhile or acceptable or whatever other adjectives you want to throw in there for a libertarian to consider voting for Trump, which did. And as I said yesterday on X, I am starting to come to regret that decision. Although I am, as I said on X, I'm happy Ross is freed. Um, I I at least like that Doge got some conversations going about USAID and other NGOs that are involved in sort of what they call democracy building. What is really actually, whenever the government names something, it's does the opposite of that, right? Because really, what it does is destabilize democracies abroad. But other than that, it's going a lot worse than I could have expected, and I'm definitely irritated. I'm pissed, to excuse me a slight vulgarity on this Christian show here. Um, and Jeremiah, I know you've been very vocal on social media, sounding the alarm on a lot of just stuff that's going on. I have a hard time rank ordering it. It's all pretty bad. What's the worst in terms of what's going on right now in your estimation?
Well, I want to start by, I guess, like sort of challenging the beginning frameworks here. Like, I don't think Trump was ever an outsider. Personally, I can see why other people did because they have an image of politics as something, posh and very finely curated. And he seemed to be the rough guy who came in and he was edgy. But like, ultimately, he was always a billionaire. You don't get to be like a multi-billionaire without being part of the big club that we ain't in, as George Carlin would put it. Like, you don't get to be part of that sacred order without sacrificing some beasts to the god. So basically, he is a servant of mammon and always has been. He's been a servant of wealth and the powerful as long as he's been in the news as subject du jour. And basically, I would say that he is a great example of antichrist behavior, because he consistently has, people who claim that he is coming to us as an angel of light, and then he ushers in so many aspects of the beast system. Like, ultimately, Jason Bassler recently said some good stuff. I mean, he's one of the people who for lack of a friendlier term, never sold out. As far as I was concerned, that's what a lot of people did, especially in the Libertarian Party. But he's been like on point with this, and one of the things that he's said is that we're getting AI border security surveillance. His cabinet is stacked with Palantir. His like entire thing has been like genocide and war and shit. And all of this has created the structure by which he can be accepted by the elites enough that like if anyone thinks that that guy with the Demolition Ranch shirt was a serious attempt, uh, but somehow also believes that we needed to take this long for declassified documents to confirm that JFK was an inside job, allegedly. Like, if it takes that long to confirm that, it's going to take longer to confirm any real thing involving inside jobs with regard to the elites trying to take Trump out. He was a Trump supporter, and he was angry with the fact that Trump wasn't doing exactly what he wanted. Um, and that whole deal, right? He's always been an insider. He's always been sort of serving those same groups of people. But then he goes down, allegedly he got shot, but we all know that he has like WWE training, so maybe he stayed down there a little bit long to make sure it was properly applied. But either way, the general idea is you know, whether or not that was fake, he's fake. He's incredibly fake. And when it comes down to it, we're dealing with extreme partisanship in order to justify his present actions and his actions over the past several months. And Ross Ulbricht, yes, absolutely, it's good that he's out, but now he's a mouthpiece for Trump. And he's also serving as basically the way for people to get out of any sort of criticism of this administration. And people shouldn't have a get out of jail free card, especially when they're jailing so many other people. And Trump is escalating a drug war that makes what took out Ross seem like basics, seem like child's play, seem like preschool kind of garbage. I think I've probably already sworn on this channel, and I'm trying not to do that, but I got so into the mode. Either way, the general gist of it is that um, he's doing currently to so many people what was done to Ross, and it's being considered justified because that's what this administration is for. It's for the elites to get what they want, but also get it with people cheering who allegedly support freedom. And I think a great example of it is one of the reasons I'm anarchist is Alex Jones, believe it or not. Because I was in the hey, do you want I was like a JW about it. Like, do you want a copy of a Young Americans for Liberty pocket constitution and Declaration of Independence with a foreword by Ron Paul? Do you want that? And do you want to come to my table so that I can, extol the virtues of the Cato Institute? And I was one of those people. I was one of those college people who was I have a table and I'm campaigning for Ron Paul, and we're gonna get back to the Constitution, and that's gonna save the Republic. That's how I started as a libertarian, and then somebody gave me a file copy of his documentary Endgame: Blueprint for Global Enslavement, and I was like, the Bilderberg Group. This sounds fake. It sounds like it's not real. And then I started to look into it, and I was like, whoa, this is real. This is real, and it's a serious problem because every single thing that they discuss at their summit eventually gets made into law. So I started to really look into them and all of the people associated with them. I think it was Business Insider at the time, had a chart, a handy chart. It was like um the Bilderberg group in the middle, and then like all the current, I think in 2016, people like affiliated with the Bilderberg group, the banks, the corporations, the multilateral, like, government organizations, including the Trilateral Commission and NATO and EU and UN and all of these people connected to, the corporations. It was laid out nicely there for me. So I just started to look into all of these little data points, and my bipolar, because like that's my version of neurospicy, is I've got bipolar and ADHD. And so like basically we either do one or more things, and one of the things that I have, like that I do, instead of going on shopping sprees like some of us do, because it's like it's a collection impulse, I'll collect information. And so during like the manic peaks of energy, I was just scraping as much information as possible, going through leaked databases, going on wikis, going through like aging forums to find old dead links about these people, and like all of these interconnected parts. And I was like, this is real, and it connects to so many actual conspiracies. It connects to so many actual dark parts of society. And Alex Jones is right about this. And I have to tell everyone. So I started to be like, maybe a decade ago, a real like strong supporter of Alex Jones. And I was spreading this documentary around and telling people they should watch it, and they should. It still holds up. But I then also found channels like True Stream Media, which is still good content, and they put out content about the same group of people. And all of this sort of stuff, right, led me to understand that if you become a multi-billionaire, you are part of the problem. You are not an outsider. You have served Mammon long enough to collect a lot of it. And just for anyone out there who doesn't know what I mean by that, means serve wealth. It's like a representation of wealth in biblical language. And you
Well, I mean,
can't
it's a good thing that Jesus says that you can serve both God and money, right?
yeah. Jesus
Wait,
is
wait,
very
wait. Maybe that was a can't. Sorry, I mixed my
yeah.
positive and negatives there.
Yeah, exactly. It's an easy slip up. So many Republicans do it. But like, so for the past years, right, I've been slowly like observing the right and their shift away from actually opposing these globalists. Like they all started to appropriate the language, right? Like they all started to be like Alex Jones language kind of mentality. We're fighting the globalists, the deep state. This is a coup, talking about all of the ways in which the system is against Trump, and he's our inside man, he's an outsider, but he never was. And even as far back as his last administration, like in 2019, you can read reports about how his intelligence agencies were monitoring anarchists and libertarians and classifying us as terrorist threats alongside ISIS. Um, and, and and like you can read this while also keeping in mind that his cabinet was, at his own admission, stacked with Palantir. Palantir is Peter Thiel's organization, and Peter Thiel is on the steering committee of the Bilderberg group. I thought we were supposed to oppose those people. I thought we were supposed to fight the globalists, not be on their bankroll.
So, yeah, I mean, there's a lot there I could respond to, but I think what I want to say the most is that what you're suggesting is that this was a great big long con to draw up not just libertarians, maybe anyone who's dissident and on the, I guess, like the alt side of things, right? And to make them think that Trump was an outsider, and that but that, and I don't know, if you're saying that he is a useful idiot in all this, or
No.
diabolically
Yes.
like okay, so that was what I, because it's hard for me. See, I have a hard time reading Trump because he doesn't come across to me as someone who has super deep held convictions or beliefs, or that really has much of um a care outside of his like his own immediate concerns. And I honestly, I think politics is mostly, I've always thought it's more of like an ego thing for him. But um I don't know, there's a, on one hand, as a fellow anarchist, I'm very much aware that the incentives are that the state and the, different, I guess, like para organizations that make up the state and the deep state and all that, and corporations and billionaires, that they of course conspire and have hidden things from the public and have their own agendas and whatnot. Um, but I often wonder if it's all that well consolidated, or if even within that space there's competing interests and forces, and if it, you know, is it a sort of, you used the term antichrist. Is it a sort of anti-spontaneous order where it's like, I've always wondered, like, is the deep state and all this really one thing, or is it just the sort of like amalgamation of all of these, sort of like evil, nefarious groups and actors, often acting on the perverse incentive structures of state power, that it it functionally acts as a sort of leviathan of sorts anyway, protecting the powerful and the rich and the elite. I don't. That's something I've often wondered, and it's tough because it's hard for me to sift through all the conspiracy stuff, because a lot of it is just not very well researched or argued or documented. And then there's just people like Alex Jones that I just have a hard time I have a hard time taking too seriously. And I even wondered sometimes if Alex Jones himself is compromised. So I don't know. There's a lot there, but I mean, certainly in terms of just evaluating the fruit of, I mean, heck, we're not. I was thinking that we'd have to wait a year or two for me to even have this kind of episode be a thing where I go and say, like, okay, do I regret my decision or not? I mean, but we're only 3 months in, really, and I'm already like, oh wow, hell, this is this is bad. And it's funny, and I'll let you respond here in a minute, but it's just from where I'm sitting, it's surreal, because in 2016 I was not a libertarian. 2016 I was still a sort of like Bernie Sanders kind of like uh leftist sort of socialist type, and I was convinced that Trump was going to be like the end of the world, the end of America then. And so to the point that I mean, I would say I had TDS, Trump derangement syndrome, to the point that I allowed myself to be pressured into voting for Hillary Clinton, even though I knew that she was an awful person, a lying awful. I was like, this is not like, she's not a progressive. She doesn't stand for any of the things I stand for. It's like, yeah, no, she's not great, but like, Trump's, pure evil. He's Hitler and all that. And then he was elected, and it wasn't like he was good, but he just wasn't this great evil that he was portrayed to be. And so I think that sort of colored my perception of him going into this. Was I thought the bottom was just the 4 years we already had, which was just, you know, a lot of bad, occasionally stumbling into something that's halfway decent, uh, and at least not being, not like Trump's never been anti-war, but he's at least given the illusion of sorts that he's not as pro-war or much of a warmonger as the rest of the neocon neoliberal establishment. But
Maybe.
man, did that do a one if complete 180 within just a couple weeks of him being in office.
So here's the thing. The He was never anti-war, and he was never
Yeah.
war neutral. He claims to have never started a new war, but that's only because Iran didn't bite. Because he assassinated one of their generals in open air.
Yeah, Soleimani.
Yeah. And then, like, cucks like the redheaded libertarian and Timcast spend all of their time, like, pretending it's justified and sending hate mobs after anyone who dares challenge Trump on anything. He relied on an army of people like that. And the general gist of it was he was helping the Israeli genocide back before it was like really in its fever pitch. He was backing the Yemeni genocide, um, you know, from Saudi Arabia. He was already blood soaked in that regard. He was helping bomb pretty much every Middle Eastern country to the point where he had to cancel the drone strike reporting mechanism because he was breaking Obama's records. And you can't do that and still seem like the anti-war president or the pro-peace president or the no new wars president. Because, I mean, maybe, but that just says that the U.S. has been in all of these wars for long enough that you can say that it's not new that you're in all of these wars. So it's like he was making things worse. He was always a warmonger. His cabinet was stacked with Palantir and Pentagon, and he said the Pentagon is in love with me. Because he was offering the biggest defense budgets ever.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's tough. It's such a mixed bag, and that's what makes it hard to evaluate Trump. Which, and again, I can go conspiracy minded, and I remember once asking this to some friends of mine before I voted for Trump, that I even wondered if like the assassination was kind of what you attempt was sort of what you were alluding to, that it was just a way to make us think Trump was so hated by the establishment, but that really they're like, no, we're putting up Kamala and making Trump look so much like an outsider so that you vote for him and he just ushers in everything we want. And everyone was like, no, like they're not that competent. Like there's no way they could pull that off. And I'm like, all right, maybe that wasn't the plan, but if it like put it this way, if it was the plan, what would they have done differently, right? Like
Exactly.
the end result is functionally the
And
same. In terms of his, you know, resume on war, again, yeah, his bombing of Soleimani was not justified. He, of course, continued to support our greatest ally, quote unquote. He was at least, I don't know, he was a mixed bag with the whole Ukraine Russia stuff. Like he kind of made that stuff worse. But he was also kind of friendly with Putin, and it in terms of like not just like, hey, I'm not even going to pick up the phone and talk to you the way that Biden and Kamala did for 4 years. And he did, now granted it was like the last minute, but he did, you know, end the 20-year occupation in Afghanistan. So I don't know. It's one of those things where I feel like, again, to some extent, and this was also something that I did think about at the time, but I don't know if um, anyway, it's hard to go back and second guess yourself and what you were thinking at the moment. But this has been something I've thought about, which is that it's possible that a lot of libertarians, such as myself, were just predisposed to be extra charitable, to want to give Trump a chance because the bar is so
very.
low in terms of like what libertarians have been able to accomplish and how horrible presidents have been on many
Mhm.
things, including foreign policy, that just at the fact that Trump seemed different and maybe not as like still bad, but just not the same type or level of bad, that then when he comes with a new team of people who are saying really, you know, things that tickle your ears, right? And name dropping Ron Paul and saying, I'm going to end, like, you know, not just saying, like again, doubling down on like, I'm going to end the war between Ukraine and Russia on day one and stuff like that. It was like, listen, I knew he was going to be bad on Israel. Like everyone knew that. I just hoped, okay, the Israel stuff's going to continue to suck, and that's going to be horrible. But Kamala would also suck, and she is going to continue to saber rattle with Russia, And it doesn't seem like Trump's going to do that. Of course, here we are now, and day one has turned into 3 months, and nothing has substantially changed other than some political theater and drama with them fighting in the White House, which again is just it's starting to get me to think more about the way I did I guess like a couple months before the election, where I thought, and I guess I'm like mad at myself because I think I had it right at the beginning, where I thought, kind of seems like they want me to vote for Trump, which is not a good thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But they to their credit and to my discredit, because I fell for it, I guess, uh, they talked a good talk, and they did pull out a lot of stunts to make it look uh, as compelling a hand as possible,
Yeah,
right?
and just just because these puzzle pieces might be like unreasonably applied, like I'll just before this gets anywhere, like on on any other sources, I don't believe that the people who died behind Trump didn't actually die. I'm not Alex Jones Sandy hooking. I'm not like still following the Alex Jones platform to a T. But like what I am saying is that all he had to do after those people actually did die is drop. And they hide razor blades in funny places in WWE. And Linda McMahon is literally in his cabinet now. So I just feel like kayfabe might have been at play there. But either way, but that's the thing. Like, if you start to look at this and look at where the alignments typically are, the U.S. government has always been willing to support authoritarian right-wing governments. And this will I'll try to make this short instead of going on like a really long bipolar rant about it, because I could probably just talk about this for 7 hours. But like, there's an article I wrote for the Free Thought Project, and I'll be making more content for that place soon here. But basically, the one article that I've written so far was 3 things they don't the U.S. government does not want you to know about Nazis, and it was a really well sourced article about how the U.S. government and Western governments in general helped the Nazis before, during, and after the war. And this is, I documented it very thoroughly. And I documented how basically everybody in right wing power later on down the line was at least partially related to Nazi money. The Koch brothers, Fred Koch was a Nazi. The Bush family, Prescott Bush was a Nazi. And their descendants would be the people who fund the conservative movement and the people who do the most to force the conservative like global policy down the line. George H.W. Bush was a tyrant, and so was George W. Bush. And both of them completely raped your freedom. Everybody out there should remember that. But now there are people who want to revise that history and pretend that having empathy is somehow a statist sort of infiltration, when it's in fact the opposite. Fred Koch was a Nazi, and the Koch brothers later on down the line carried his legacy over in forcing right-wing ideology into basically everything, into the roots of the libertarian movement. Samuel Edward Konkin III even included in the New Libertarian Manifesto, like, this was a problem with the original Libertarian Party and movement, is that they were ceding grounds to people like this. And like, he called it, because the movements of right libertarians and the movements of conservatism as a body politic later on down the line would all serve the elites. They would all serve their agenda, and then just package it like you were being some kind of rebel by going against the liberal elite. But that's not it. The cathedral includes the right, and Yarvin is a hack. So when people act like somebody is just an outsider because they're on the right, here's something. Jimmy Carter and Zbigniew Brzezinski, they funded, armed, and trained the Mujahideen.
Yep.
Those people were right-wing, theocratic governments. And those people would eventually become the offshoots of those people would eventually become Al Qaeda, ISIS,
Hmm.
ISIL, Al Nusra, and the Taliban. The Taliban would later on, right before 9/11, get like $53 million. Why? Because the US government wanted them to criminalize opium. What did they do? They did do that. And then they sold the opium that they seized and made a shit ton of money, pardon the language. And they use that to fuel their right wing dictatorship. And then later on down the line, the U.S. is like, "Oh, the Taliban is so tyrannical. We've got to go give them some freedom." And it's always like this, like the contra.
Except the ones fighting Russia, of course. Those we can still support, but
Exactly. Yeah. And it's always like this, like the Iran Contra affair. Two right-wing like organizations, two definitely decidedly repressive organizations would be supported by the US government in the form of arms or in the form of money. And those people like that would be shuffled around in an exchange that would eventually lead to this CIA smuggling these drugs from those people into the inner cities and using it as an excuse for the war on drugs, which is now being used as an excuse to deport people because we've got to do something about the fentanyl crisis and these drug gangs that are taking over cities, even though they're not.
mm,
And even people who aren't members of those gangs are being accused of being members of those gangs. And that's all you actually need in this administration because due process is a thing of the past. And so, like, what I'm trying to say is when Trump got the US out of Afghanistan, he could have done it a lot sooner and a lot more orderly, but he didn't. And suddenly the Taliban, the new government there, has bases. They have arms. They have lots and lots of stuff. And it's not the first time the US government has handed them a package on a silver platter. So to me, this is a continuation, and it's still a continuation even to this day because the US government is helping people like Malay. It's helping people like, through Elon Musk, Georgia Maloney, who's a literal Mussolini fan. It's helping people like Bukele, who's a fascist in El Salvador. It's helping all of these global fascists as long as they're willing to
I gotta say
support the broader program.
all of this stuff has made me more sympathetic to your criticisms towards Malay, which is not a popular position in really any libertarian circle, at least not the ones that
Yep.
I swim in. But and I think actually I had the right idea, but just came to the wrong conclusion for a while because
Mm.
I sort of said, well, listen, a lot of libertarians of all stripes, Mises, Cato, Reason, even people who were like critical of the Mises caucus endorsing Trump, uh, functionally, whatever you want to call it, endorsing the strategy to vote for Trump and whatever. Um, but they'd say, "Oh, but like Malay's a great example of like a libertarian in politics." But you look at a lot of Malay's policies, and he's cracking hard on the drug war and and the gangs there in all the wrong ways, uh, and sort of repealing uh, like welfare stuff and social safety nets, which I've always believed, like like that stuff shouldn't exist, but like there is sort of a like with anything, like Social Security is a good example. Like I think it's almost a worse tyranny, or at least a doubling of tyrannies, to sort of make someone dependent on a system, and then when they're in a place where they don't have other means of like like finding the free market alternative, to just strip that from them without at least having some kind of phase out or some sort of. And Malay's not done that well, from what I can tell. There's been a lot of people who have been evicted and lost their homes and businesses and stuff. And so like a lot of this stuff was happening, but people were like excusing it for Malay, but then, holding Trump up to a purity test. And I was just like, well, if you're not going to have a purity test for Malay, I'm not going to have a purity test for Trump. And now I'm, again, sort of sitting here like it's a little therapeutic talking this stuff out loud, like looking back and trying to think about what I miscalculated on. And again, I think I was observing things and just like it's almost like I mean, I use sports analogies. It's like, fumbling at the 1 yard line, right? Like I almost got there and then just whoop. Um, because I'm kind of thinking the right approach was to probably be like, no, Trump needs to be held to a very high, critical standard, and Malay too. Just because Malay says he likes Rothbard and Hoppe and all that, I remember you bringing it up, and it's very telling that Hoppe is critical of Malay, even though Malay said that Hoppe is one of his, uh, inspirations or idols or something like that. So, again, and I'm not even saying I 100% agree with you on all this, because sometimes I think I see more nuances in these things, but I'm definitely seeing these things as more net negatives now than I was, led to believe, or leading myself to believe, uh, several months ago. And it again, it does. And this is again one of those things that feels tinfoily hat, and I don't like talking about it more than I have to. But one of the common denominators between Malay and Trump is this sort of like kissing the ring of, again, our greatest ally of Israel and the Israel lobby,
Yeah.
which, and some people again were defending Malay, saying like, well, he has to like play friendly with
Mhm.
Israel and tie himself to the dollar, and like, he has to, for him to be able to do any of the things he wants to do, he has to like kiss up to like the global establishment. And it's like, maybe we should, I don't know, look at this global establishment that seems to coalesce around America and Israel with a little bit more scrutiny, because I feel like there's a lot of us libertarians and libertarian anarchists who, um, it's like, I know this stuff exists, but I sometimes am a little uncomfortable dipping more than my toe into that kind of water, because I exist in two worlds. On one hand, I'm in the libertarian world. On the other hand, I go to church, right? And I serve in different positions in my church and in my job and my community. And it's like, I don't want to. It's tough, man. Like, I have to, like, I remember that I was at like one of our Bible study like life group meetings a couple of years ago. I'm sorry I'm ranting, but it's all
It's fun.
connected. And someone just brought up like, conspiracy theories. It's just like, oh yeah, like there's people who think that JFK was an inside job. That's so silly. And I just had to sit there and go, uh, well, I don't know. Like, you just start like asking questions, and the most like, like, I'm not saying it was an inside job, but like, I don't know. Like, what about all these, warnings they had? What about the fact that, some of the things that JFK was doing weren't very popular in terms of his, trying to pull out of certain wars. And so it's like, trying to plant seeds. And even that's tough. So then for me to be like, oh, especially in like evangelical circles, be like, hey, by the way, Israel is, like the state of Israel. I'll be clarified. The state of Israel. It's not a Jewish
Right.
thing. It's not Israel,
Right.
but the state of Israel is kind of at the epicenter of a lot of this shite. and
Yeah.
and it is kind of hard to keep on being delicate about that. So
But that's the thing. Like, it's right in line. Like, so Saudi Arabia and Israel serve two different religions. Their governments serve two different religions. But somehow those people always get along, even though their Bibles say they're not supposed to, even though they constantly are supposed to be in some way at war. But they're not, and they're the most like approachable allies in those situations. And here's the real ticker. Here's where everybody in your audience and anybody else who wants to can start calling me a commie, because they all serve capital. That's what they really serve. They serve capital. They're right-wing governments. They have similarly socially repressive ideals at their base. They all want basically the same thing for the region, which is perpetual war for money so that they can expand their territorial reaches for the sake of their god. And ultimately, when it comes down to it, America can exploit that. So when America comes in and they're like, Saudi Arabia, we're going to work with you because Trump is going to get like money from them, like which he desperately needed during his lawsuits recently. He's literally paid for by the Saudi Arabian government in the form of golf tournaments they held on his Mar-a-Lago course. And this is just one of many connections. Elon Musk had part of his purchase of Twitter bankrolled by Saudi Arabia, and Peter Thiel, which are aligned because they're globalists. And these people are all like on a similar page to Israel because they all operate at the interests of international capital. It's not because of Jewry. There are plenty of Jews that hate Israel. There are plenty of Jews that oppose the genocide. You don't have to be a genocider if you're a Jew. That's Nazi shit to say. The Jews shouldn't agree with the Nazis, maybe. But like when you're generally on this like this track, there are multiple ways you could go. You could be like, oh, the race is bad, and then this race is behind everything. But then you ignore all the other races and all their other hands and things. Like you ignore the China connections. You ignore the deep penetration of Saudi finance. You ignore the globalists. You ignore the fact that old French money is involved. You ignore the still relevance of the crown. You ignore the fact that the Vatican funded the Nazis during World War II and helped with appeasement because they said that we will make Vatican City an independent country. And so they were like, awesome, we'll do what you want. And then they made the age of consent 14. So, do with that what you will. But the general idea is actually, I think was it 14 or was it 12? It was something low. It's Epstein level. So the general gist of it is that like, there's like the real through line in all of this is serving state capitalism. It is serving the state capitalism that Murray Rothbard was willing to call out when he called it out, because what we have is a capitalist government, and it is not anarcho-capitalist. The reason the word anarcho-capitalist exists is to distance from state capitalism. He literally said this. It's a fact that's inconvenient for many of his followers who want to claim that they're following him while also claiming that the only thing capitalism could possibly mean is freedom. It's asinine. It's dumb.
No, I 100% agree with everything you said there. With the caveat, yeah, because I think, and I don't know, sometimes I've gone back and forth on that debate. I know in anarchist circles, some people just don't want to use the word capitalist at all. I just want to say free markets or freed markets, market anarchism. And I don't know, that can be semantics, and it's neither here nor there, but just the fundamental idea that like free trade and enterprise and the idea of competition and like private ownership of property and capital is not intrinsically bad, but when you pair that with in a system where you have a state that can pick winners and losers, that I don't want to overstate this, but in some ways it can be worse than other forms of state mixed economies, right? Like I've been talking to my brother about this because he was recently in Europe, and we were and he's also like a libertarian, but he was kind of like, it's kind of weird how there's certain like social welfare and like centrally planned things in European countries that seem to work better than stuff we see here in the States. And I think it's like, yeah, well, there it's like, it's not that they're not, again, it's not that they don't have any problems, right? But where it works, where those things work the best, and it's not a univariate thing, but one of the variables is that while they have social safety nets and things like that, they are not as much on that state capitalistic spectrum, at least internally, where you have the state just funneling money to the top.
Right.
which is exactly what you have here in America. So yeah, I think it's 100% a valid critique. It's a Rothbardian critique.
Yeah, and like,
As you pointed out.
because you want to talk those things, like I posted this on Twitter and I'm still getting called a socialist for it, but I don't care. Um, so like I posted, my mother had a heart attack recently. This is true. She's retired. She now needs government health care to follow up and make sure she doesn't die. Anyone who'd cut her life short before stopping the state from killing people is my enemy. Libertarians desperately need optics checks in many
Yeah,
cases. And
100% agree.
like,
Yeah.
so the thing is, like, people jumped on board. They really hopped on pop with that one. They were like, "Oh, so you don't want the welfare state to ever end? You're an anarchist?" And I'm like, "No, reread it. It's
Right.
before. If you want to end the welfare state as part of ending all other states and transition onto a mutual aid society where people like her are taken care of because they contributed a certain amount or something like that, or like where we just act like human beings, or the way Christians are supposed to act, and not be stacking your wealth here on earth, but like giving what you can to those who need it, being a good Samaritan, not throwing the foreigner out like Trump is doing, like all of
No,
these
we're gonna
things.
get there.
Yeah, like all of these things, like, they're basics. They're basics. They should be basics for, like, but these people, they're ignoring. They're ignoring the slow decline of what they wanted. I've been invited, and I accepted the invite pretty much immediately. And y'all are free to extend similar invites should you decide to. But I was invited to be a delegate for, like, not a delegate as in like politically, but a delegate account, like, person for the Twitter account for Libertarian Party of Louisiana. um and so I am now posting over there, and much to the hatred of certain people who would rather see me faded to obscurity because they can't really disprove what I say, um the account over there posted this thing very recently, and it's a nice little chart. I don't remember if it's them specifically. I think it is because it's watermarked, but they posted this chart, and I'll post this in the private chat here so that if you want to, you can share it on the screen. But I think this chart tells a great story. I didn't post this one. I post a lot of stuff there, but this was not mine. This one is talking about how Doge has revised its projections again. In October 2024, it was 2 trillion in annual cuts. In January 2025, it was 1 trillion in annual cuts. And now it's only 150 billion in annual cuts. Doge, in about 6 months, cut its goal by about 93%. Meanwhile, the Trump administration is ramping up spending over 150 billion, higher than both Biden years, and is asking for a $4 trillion increase to the debt ceiling. People should listen less to what politicians say and watch more of what they do. Um, and that's exactly what it is. Like, and when you talk about Malay, he's doing very similar things. The peso tumbled after what they took recently, an IMF bailout of $20 billion. IMF, the IMF
Yeah.
is a globalist organization. These people, the right, pretends to fight the globalists, and then they do anything but.
Yeah.
And so, like, they want to talk about like ending benefits as though that's somehow like an awesome thing. They want to talk about ending benefits, right? Because when you're talking about like how to market an idea, telling old people that they're going to die soon because they can't afford their health care, and they're going to be thrown off their social security, and all of these things are going to go away, while Trump is pushing a $1 trillion, let me repeat that, $1 trillion military budget, it's probably not going to sell well. Or while he's also saying that there's going to be unlimited jobs in Gaza, we're going to clear out the minorities, it's going to be a cleansing of an ethnicity. We're going to do that, and it's going to be unlimited jobs in Gaza, and we're going to make it a paradise. And he posts this AI video where, like, Trump is a golden statue. This is antichrist behavior.
Yeah, that's I think I temporarily sort of forgot, or at least wanted to diminish the insane levels of just outright like cult idol worship that goes on in Trump and MAGA circles. But like, man, did that come back with a vengeance, and is it disturbing as ever, especially for those who literally conflate Jesus and Trump. And I have to try not to start flipping tables when that happens. Although maybe I should flip some tables. I don't know. Uh, no, listen, there's a lot there I agree with. I think that it's sort of like there are a lot of these thought experiments where it's like you don't want to cut the sort of social spending that provides meals to people in prison before you abolish prisons, right? Like that would be, I mean, just a total inhumane disaster, right? People like you're psychopathic, that you just be like, and we're gonna like, I want to free these people, but in the meantime, we're gonna starve them. Like, what's wrong with you? And I kind of feel that way about most of our. I mean, not that like not. I'm sure there are some social welfare programs that like I wouldn't necessarily object to being cut in the short term, but there are certain ones, especially related to healthcare, especially because again, so that like Harry Brown quote that's like the state,
Breaks
breaks
your
your
leg.
knee, breaks your
Yeah.
leg, gives you crutches, and makes you think couldn't walk without them. Um, so to kind of like take that analogy maybe further than its original use, but like that is what it does. But once it does that, it is cruel to take the crutches away while the leg is still broken, right? Like if the state hurt you, I want the state to disappear. But while you are in this state where the state has completely screwed you over, then it's like, you know, the state kind of owes you that sort of restitution is sort of the way I view it. At least until you're able to, be fully recovered, and that's why, like, let's say you're gonna like phase things out or something like that. That seems like a better option to me, but that's not um, always what people agree to. I do want to touch on because we're getting a little long in time here, but probably go another 15 minutes or so. Um, the immigration stuff, man, that's also been. I think that's one of the things I underestimated, and to be sure, uh, being terrible at immigration is another bipartisan issue, right? I mean, Obama
Hmm.
deported way more people than Trump did, and Biden and Kamala were certainly not slouches about this either. Uh, and you even know from seeing posts I've made and debates I've been in that I am not. So again, just to make my position abundantly clear, I'm an anarchist, so my position on state borders is they don't even really exist and should the state should stop should cease to exist in its entirety. In like sort of like the what do we do right now? I've often been not quite a enthusiastic, just full open borders libertarian for the short term. But that is a far cry from what I've seen a lot of libertarians do, which is just, and they've done this on tariffs too, is just completely bend over backwards to be like, actually, deporting, uh, you know, hundreds of thousands of immigrants or millions of immigrants, even legal ones, or even heck, even deporting our own citizens if they criticize again the one certain nation that you're not allowed to criticize. That this is all fine and good, right? Or maybe it's not ideal, but like, yeah, it's a completely acceptable libertarian position to take in the here and now. And I am just like, if there's a lot of charity I have for the Mises Caucus and for that style of libertarian, more charity than than you tend to have, and that's because I was in that group for a long time. I have a lot of friends there, and I even sometimes still have sympathies towards their points of view. Even on immigration, I tend, again, as I said, not to be an open borders absolutist. But I have very little, if any, charity to give on the ones who have gone so hard to, like, again, it is one thing, I'll make this clear and land this on this. It is one thing to say, like, hey, maybe we should have some kind of, like, I don't know, uh, semi-open border system, like an Ellis Island system where, like, it's not just like completely open and unrestricted, but like it's not overly restrictive either. And then to go from that to just be like, oh, actually, we need to be doing massive deportation, including sending people to Gitmo and just completely shutting the border down. And also, let's get into a trade war. And I'm just like, this is the like this, this this is like, you've gone so far past the line you can't even see the line anymore, and it's just it makes me angry and sad because, as you said, and I agree, as a like, beyond just my libertarian convictions, as a Christian, uh there is there is no way on Christian grounds to defend these immigration policies or these tariff policies. No way. They are destructive to human life and human flourishing. They are literally ripping people from their homes. They are destroying, like, as much as we, like, I talked to you before the show about how my old business when I was self-employed with my family was destroyed by COVID and the lockdowns and the totalitarianism of that. These tariffs and these immigration policies are cut of the same cloth. They
Mm-hmm.
are destroying people's families, destroying people's livelihoods. It is not defensible in
Yeah,
the slightest, and I'm not going to mince words over that.
yeah. Well, and here's the thing. If the Mises Caucus was a Mises Caucus, I would have less problem with them. They are not a Mises Caucus. The middle link there in the private chat, I hope you share your screen and scroll through that just lightly while people can read this stuff. Because a real Mises Caucus would be supporting the things that I wrote in my little essay there. I basically made a quote wall that people complained about the length of. Um, like, I made a quote wall on the Louisiana LP Twitter account. And this quote wall was nothing but wall to wall Mises quotes about immigration and about how the only kinds of people who want to end this sorts of immigration are statists. They're the kinds of people he would have stomped out of the room and called socialists. Um, so, and even though, like, personally, I work with libertarian socialists, I work with the left, I have no problem with being called a socialist, but the fact that he would agree with me and not the Mises Caucus says everything. When Justin Amash went and read Mises quotes to the Mises Caucus and got booed for it, that says everything. When the Mises Caucus removes me from their spaces and silences me, like, in their groups, and blocks me on all their social medias because I criticized Javier Milei, a foreign pro-war president, because, like, his policies were directly antithetical to what Mises would have promoted and supported. It shows that they're not a Mises caucus. And so, like, all of this encapsulates what I'm talking about. I don't have a problem with people who joined the Mises Caucus because they wanted more Misesian thought. Most of those people left. Most of those people have significant regrets. Karen Ann Harlos is an example. She was on my show recently discussing some of those regrets. Like, there's a significant amount of people who I have spoken to who regret supporting a caucus that claimed Mises but was Misesian in name only. And from a real early on point, even people like Tho Bishop were recognizing this. The Mises Institute was opposed to the Mises Caucus, and they had a feud for a bit there because, the Mises Institute has a whole lot of articles against the kinds of things that Trump supports. And the Mises Caucus was making excuses for all of that for a long time. So the reason I'm bringing all of this up is because Mises was a staunch immigration advocate. He said that it equalized wages. He said that it made, demand and accessibility to higher quality and cheaper goods easier. He said that it was like, you know,
Right.
sign of freedom. He said it was a
Well, that
sign.
and just to quickly, that point is so important because see, like I've never understood the economic arguments against immigration. Those are not the ones that trip me up. There are things about more like the ways that the state can weaponize open borders, or the ways in which open borders can lend towards sort of like cultural destabilization, and also just sort of like it's like practical concerns that I think about. But a lot of people get this like, oh, they're gonna steal our jobs and they're gonna lower wages, and I'm like, listen, the problem with wages is the Federal Reserve and the banking system and the capitalists we talked about earlier, which are jacking the prices up all across the board as part of the game in which they become, multi billionaires. But the solution is not we need to artificially raise wages through protectionism. It's, as you just said, lowering costs by creating more abundance of goods.
Mhm.
That's like the economic side of this stuff has never made sense to me, that anyone who calls themselves a libertarian, who has ever read anything of Mises or any other, you know, economic libertarian, could ever have any strong grounds to object to a free immigration system. Anyway,
Yeah.
sorry to cut you off,
Well,
but I just thought that's important to point out during this time of hyper protectionism in the form of tariffs and immigration controls.
yeah, and like the Libertarian Party has planks in it that talk about how like we need to keep the anything that gets in the way of like the free like travel of human capital and labor across borders is anti-libertarian. And the
What was the
libertarian
number one rallying cry for the takeover post the initial like Sarwark getting, you know, saying things about the Mises Institute? The number one recruiting call was how bad the Libertarian Party was on the COVID lockdowns.
Mhm.
It's like, oh, you mean when the state controls the movement of people and tells people that their jobs aren't essential and things like that, that's bad for human flourishing and liberty?
It's almost like when Ron Paul said that the borders can be used to keep you in, you should have listened to Ron Paul
Right.
rather than Angela McArdle. And so like when it comes, and here's the thing, like, maybe there could have been a case made for, making pragmatic and emotionless arguments in favor of, a Trump administration over a Kamala administration. I mean, I still personally don't agree because I think that it takes a significant amount of sort of cucking to the right in order to get to that place. But if they were sticking to that, there would have been a whole lot less to criticize them on. Instead, what they did is they had things like that Rescue the Republic rally, where literally the campaign materials for that rally were like, you know, uh, weird soft focus images of like Trump and his cadre of people leading people across the Potomac in George Washington boats that were probably AI generated. Like the whole deal was cringe. It was cringe, but it was cringe done by I think Dan Smots, so it was acceptable cringe. It was cringe done by these sorts of people in this like status libertarian ecosystem who already made it clear that they were going to block and stymie any criticism of these players. Like Javier Milei was always wrong. His platform was actively evil. And when people like me pointed that out and actively highlighted sections from his platform talking about his AI facial recognition super state, making it easier to lock people up, criminalizing protests, you know, all this stuff that he said he was going to do that matched exactly the kinds of things you could read about in Bertram Gross's Friendly Fascism or Naomi Klein's The Shock Doctrine, two books I consistently tell people they need to read. Like, when these people do this sort of thing, they're making their position clear. Their position is, like, we will support an authoritarian right-wing government as long as it's a right-wing government. And we'll also ignore how right-wing all the other governments are in order to claim that we're fighting the left. And these Biden's not a leftist. His government wasn't leftist. They just had more rainbows than Trump did. And now that Trump is criminalizing being woke, basically, and targeting LGBT people, and now there's literally a bill in the Texas House for like criminalizing being a furry in schools. Because they're lying in that bill about like litter boxes in restrooms. Since all of this stuff is happening, this is the cultural result. We're dealing with a culture of purging minorities, inconvenience, people that are considered degenerate. Where have I heard this before?
Yeah, I mean, just to comment on that briefly. I am a conservative Christian in terms of that the way I read the Bible, and my convictions are that I don't find myself persuaded by the argument to view that there's a way for a man to be able to identify as a woman or vice versa. I don't believe in the sort of like, gender non-binary theory or things like that. I think marriage should be between a man and a woman. And I have concerns about, I guess like the trans movement or LGBT rights activists, and things that I think are targeted at youth. I have concerns about that, which I share with right wingers, which I think are valid. All of that is like it is just so not important compared to like racing towards World War III and supporting multiple genocides between Yemen and Gaza. And it's just like, it's like, you know what? It's hard for me to really agree. Like, for me, it's like, I actually care about the kids. But when you say I care about the kids, you care about them when they're being introduced to things that are inappropriate. But when we're dropping bombs on them, you don't care one bit.
Mm-hmm.
So sorry, I
and
I
also
there's a major incongruency there, which I'm not willing to ignore.
And also, to be clear, we should have a stream about that sometime, because I think I have ways to sort of assuage some concerns, both from a political perspective and from a biblical one. Because here's the thing, like the I'll just jump back into it, because like Jeremiah Harding, you can just put a quote like "everything is Nazis" and then Jeremiah Harding after that. The general thing that I could say there is, in Nazi Germany, when they wanted to start to criminalize the other side, they went against what they called degeneracy. They went against it because they were rhetorically linking it to
Yeah.
Jewry. They went against it because they were rhetorically linking it to all that was wrong with society, blaming
One of the
the
first things they did was burn down the Institute of Sexual Research.
Well, to be fair to the Nazis, they just burnt the books. They took the books out of it. But like, yeah, they should. If you don't have anything to fear from literature existing, because that literature does not scientifically challenge your worldview, then you wouldn't burn it. You would challenge it. You would liberally understand it. You would be a Misesian about it, and you would say, "We'll have a conversation about this, and we'll try to actually suss it out." Instead, the Hitler Youth were out there in the streets torching anything that went against the worldview, which prevents it from being read, to be understood, to be properly interfaced with. And that's the thing. The party of banning books will never be the party of free speech.
100%
And
agree.
and when these people are doing that now, it's like so many examples of books that they just don't want people to read.
I was
And
so Yeah, I agree. So like this is so cool. So I was just talking earlier this week with one of my LCI co-patriots, Carrie Baldwin, and because we're in the process here at LCI at writing a second edition to our book, which I have right here, Faith Seeking Freedom. So we're doing a second edition and we're expanding it, and we're her and I are working on the section on the culture war, and we were talking about how in like our brainstorming how evangelicals and sort of the right wing establishment gets this so wrong because what they do in the face of uh, whether it's literature or stuff online is they just suppress it when it comes to people who are um, peddling or promoting views that are contrary to what people's convictions are, and it's like, and that's the wrong approach. The way that the Bible would instruct us, what we would argue for, and that libertarian virtues would map onto this as well, is that you need to be able to actually engage with these materials. Like suppressing them is is going to, on one hand, if there's things of value there, you're suppressing valuable information, which is going to lead to pain. If there is something there which is in error, suppressing it is just going to attract people to it, and then when you go to try to show where the errors are, you're not going to be able to do that effectively because you haven't actually engaged with it. You haven't read it. You haven't. So it's like Christians who have this allergy to the point where they're not willing to engage in the conversations or read the literature or things like that.
Really tips
Like,
their hand, doesn't it?
right. They basically are sowing the seeds of their own defeat in the quote unquote culture war. And then what they resort to is what you were talking about, which I've been sounding the alarm on for a couple of years now too, which is to say, yeah, like the whole like call for degeneracy. Well, I think calling out things that are sinful in society is part of the role of the church. The antidote is the gospel and Christ and salvation and the Holy Spirit. It's not the state and coercion and totalitarianism. And it's like, and if, I mean, you should believe that when Jesus basically gives us that model. And also, like, hey, wouldn't it be cool if God had this, like, I don't know, incredible foresight to sort of like put in the biblical narrative itself a sort of experiment where he gives people a bunch of laws in a state and says you're going to use coercion to stamp out sin and disobedience and degeneracy,
Didn't
and
work out so well, did it?
didn't work. It never worked at all. But like, it just like the hardcore commies, who be like, real communism hasn't been tried yet. It's like, real Christian nationalism hasn't been tried yet. It's like, no, it has. It just sucks and it's not Christian. So
Yeah. And that's the other half. So first off, Hody, actually, we should do this as a panel, and we should do it within the next couple weeks if that works for Jacob. We should do this as a panel because he says, "Hey, I got dibs in talking with him about homosexuals
yeah,
and such
we did a
first."
part one last year before all the Trump stuff popped off. So
Yeah, well, we've got
yeah.
so much more to discuss, but like that's the thing though. This is literally repeating Nazism. Like
Yeah.
Auschwitz was not, it wasn't like in Germany. It was in Poland. It was like he had it in another country so that it would be in another jurisdiction and he would have his hands cleaner of the clear human rights violations that were occurring there. It was a complex of like 40 things, and it was like, all over there, handily tucked away. And that's what's happening. We're getting the same thing. We're getting Gitmo concentration camps. We're getting Bukele, El Salvador concentration camps. We're getting concentration camps potentially like on the border, which will be in like interstitial concentration camps to the other concentration camps. We're getting fast tracking and black bagging of basically anyone who's going against the narrative sent to those concentration camps. And it's not like, he's not doing full ethnic cleansing here. That might be next because he says, he said this to Bukele directly. He said was gonna, get the homegrowns next. I'm a homegrown, and you're a homegrown. The homegrowns should understand I was right. after all my years of saying that Trump was going to start with the illegals, start with the trans people, start with all these people that's like considered inconvenient to the right. He's going to start with all these minorities that the right is rah against, and then he's going to go against you.
Hold
He's
on, you
going to
say
have all.
wait. The government creates a boogeyman and then passes laws so that they can violate the rights of that group, and then they turn it on the
Mhm.
people.
And then
That
they
never
get
happens.
a strong man so that they can muscle through their policies and act like, oh, it's not us, our hands are clean, look at this insane guy, we need to be brought back to the calm rational center after all of this and not reverse anything he did. It's like that. It's like, I mean, he was breaking drone records, so he removed the mandate to report it. Did Biden put it back? Nope. Biden did not, in fact, put it back, because that's the point. The state wants people like this to push things through that they can then use. Trump was the architect of the lockdowns. Trump was the guy who was hyperfunding the Pentagon with COVID money. Trump was the guy who was like, running the facial recognition super state that would enable like contact free everything during this all. He was working, he hired Fauci before Biden did. He was the guy. And then he got to pretend because, of the steal, stop the steal, and January 6th and all that. He got to pretend, oh, it was taken from me. The deep state doesn't want me in there. I'm an outsider. I'm a
January 6th is like one of the most infuriating days in like political history of my lifetime, because it's like one of the few things where both sides get it so catastrophically wrong in the most annoying ways possible. Like, it was a violent insurrection to overthrow democracy, and then like actually both of them claim, ironically, that democracy was violated in that
Mhm.
time period,
Yeah.
and it's so dumb.
And
Um,
it's like the other side's like, "Oh, it was just a guided tour," ignoring all the windows that were broken and things that were smashed and stolen, and people that were trampled and otherwise brutalized, and they ignore that. And then like the other side ignores all the ways that things were unreasonably escalated, like Ashley Babbitt should never have been killed. Like they both do the same thing of like hyper exaggerating the other side, even though they're both on the same side, and it's center right authoritarian capitalism. um you know and the other side says that this was just a guided museum tour. No, it wasn't. It wasn't. They're all the other side says that it's a violent insurrection. They didn't bring guns, they didn't bring mostly anything. They threw a tantrum. It was a
yeah,
tantrum.
and it's
They
like,
weren't even
listen,
good with
some of
OPSEC. Like
and
there
like,
were exif data on all of their photos on a public site
yeah,
led
and
by a secret
did
service
some of them
guy.
did some of them break some property, and did some violence occur? Sure, but like, does it warrant the level of, lack of due process and locking up a lot of these people for how many years now? I mean, it's just it that seems like a clear overreaction as well. It's just it's crazy.
And then Trump
Um,
overreacts on the other side by pardoning all of them. And surprise, surprise, some of the people he pardoned, and this was universal pardons, were also being tried for sex offenses with minors. And now those people can't be tried because they were universally pardoned.
well, it's a
And
good thing
so,
we got the full unredacted Epstein list, right?
yeah. And so that's the thing. So actually, here's a fun part. Um, I recognized those documents as soon as they were leaked, and I was like, wait, really? Really? You're confirming this? Because the redacted documents were all in the same, it was the same sorts of screenshots, the same sort of scans of documents that had already been released. And so I was like, I have those, don't I? And so like the files of those things were already released, and you can see all the unredacted information. It's already been floating around, and now the US government confirmed it. But instead of like recognizing that this would be a great time to show transparency and being like actually the most transparent administration, you know what they're doing? They're sending out these binders with photo ops for their favorite handpicked journalists. It's the same exact thing as the Twitter files with Elon Musk. Like, That's the reason he went against Taibbi so hard afterward, because Taibbi broke ranks and he was like, you know what? Actually, there's some pretty bad stuff happening, and also we're going to do some cool stuff with our with Substack. And now he's being suppressed. You can't share Substack links. Everybody should listen to the Free Thought Project interview with Matt Taibbi recently. It's very enlightening. And so, like, Elon Musk, Trump, all of these people are fascists. Elon Musk especially, like, doing weird victory tours with AFD, which is fascists, and Georgia Maloney, which is a fascist. And like, all these people, global fascism is what we have, not global communism. We don't have a global leftist threat. We have a global right-wing threat, authoritarian right-wing threat. And that's the reason these people are all on board with that. Like, that's the reason that these people like continue to work with people like Peter Thiel. Because and we'll be going over this tomorrow in a Twitter space, which you are invited to. But like basically Peter Thiel is a bankroller for the globalist elite. He was behind PayPal. He helped fund Elon Musk's Twitter purchase. He was he wasn't behind PayPal, but he helped bankroll it. He was part of the PayPal mafia along with like Elon Musk. He is behind Palantir, which is a giant intelligence gathering firm. And he also was behind some of the seed funding for Facebook, which is an intelligence gathering platform that was also partially funded by the CIA. And now he's affiliated with all of these people, Peter Thiel and Palantir and all of these people. And like Elon Musk is helping them advertise their books, where they're doing nothing but providing fan service to the military and intelligence industrial complex and Palantir. And here's a fun bit from a Christian perspective here, saying that because of the verse, by your fruits you shall be known, what really counts is whether you have a greater level of output than you do of input. And therefore, Henry Kissinger did really well from a biblical perspective. That's in the book, written by the CEO of Palantir and promoted by Elon Musk. Henry Kissinger is a God follower, or a great example of a Christian application of principle. That's what we're dealing with. We are dealing with an AI superstate administration of evil, an antichrist beast system. This is not, there is no way around saying that Trump is everything Christians are supposed to hate. He is a false prophet. He is a golden idol. He is a wolf in sheep's clothing. But even still, a wolf in wolf's clothing. He was always talking about how Epstein was a great guy, fun to be with, similar taste in younger women. He was always talking about how like the you could grab him by the pussy. They just let you do it. He was always talking about how he would bang his daughter if he got the chance, because if she wasn't my daughter, oh, let me tell you, this man has always been evil. And the fact that any Christian ever thought he was anything but, especially while he was selling, and I can't stress this enough, signed Bibles for
Oh,
$1,000.
dude, I know. Don't even get me started on the Bibles. Don't even get me started. I mean, just yeah. No, no. Listen, I would love to keep talking, but I will fall
Yeah.
asleep here soon, so we'll have to bring it to a close. But I really enjoyed this. I think, yeah, there's not a lot of separation here between us. I mean, I'll end with I'll make a closing thought, and then you can give a closing thought as well. Um, I understand why I voted for Trump, and I understand why a lot of libertarians did. I understand why Angela and others pursued the strategy that they did. And perhaps I'm being over charitable, but I, I don't know. I know these people. I've known them a long time, so I I am assuming the best of their intentions, and I believe that they thought that they could make a deal with the devil, so to speak, that they could uh, leverage some power and some influence to get some good things out of this administration. And I will at least give them credit that Ross is free. And for Ross and his family, that it is. I have mixed feelings about all this because it's hard for me to be like a vote is like kind of a worthless thing, and it would be hard for me to like look Lynn in the face and be like, I didn't take this chance to try to free your son if it hadn't worked out or something, right? So I don't know. I think it's really tough, and I'm inclined to be gracious. What I don't like is that in the fallout of this, that there aren't more people who are willing to at least be where I'm at, where they're like, "Hey, I'm glad Ross is free, and I understand why I did it, but this sucks. Like, we don't have to sit here and try to defend all this. We should be on the front lines combating all of it." And I understand the game that Angela and Austin and others are trying to play, the coalitioning game. And I'm not saying that I don't see zero value in it, but at some point, this coalition stopped being a coalition. You might argue it was always a Trojan horse of sorts, and I don't know, maybe. But definitely right now, they have all, unless you're gonna go full, like, they're all playing 5D chess, right? Like, it's like, no, sorry. Tulsi sold out. Bobby Kennedy sold out. Uh Patel sold out. These were all, at best, they were imperfect people who were at least right about a few really good issues, who either got blackmailed or became compromised through some means as soon as they got into those positions. And at worst, they just were con men who played very long cons. And the end result is the same. We need to be calling this shit out because it's got incredibly bad ramifications of genocide, of global and local destabilization, economic devastation, and we can't, it's like at some point, like, coalitions are like where there's like, I guess like a quid pro quo, where like you have common goals and interests that you're working towards. I don't Where are the common goals anymore? I don't see them. They they I will say that I believe that they were there, but they're not there anymore. So we have to be able to look back, admit that maybe we got some things wrong, maybe say, you know what, I did what I thought was right, and I pursued a path where I thought I could do some good, but now that's not working, and I got to try something else. And it's frustrating to see that there's a lot of libertarians who aren't able to do that. And I've always been critical of this. I love what the Mises Caucus stood for. I love a lot of the people there still. I don't wish ill towards them, but not being willing to do this, to sit down and talk with critics and people with a point of view, it only hurts you. As we talked about before, it only hurts you because some biblical lessons here to sort of to dot the i's and cross the t's on what I'm saying. The Bible says, as iron sharpens iron, man will sharpen another man. And that doesn't, that can sometimes be an abrasive process, right? When you're dealing with people who don't like what you're doing or that have a harsh word of criticism for you. But you got to be able to take that. And you know what? Like, give it back. Be like, no, I think I'm right, and have the fight, but don't silence the dissenters.
Do not set your face like flint or your heart like stone. Do not become a used wineskin incapable of
Yes.
receiving new stuff.
Right, exactly. And I'll just, one last word of biblical wisdom to kind of put a cap into this, and I'll give you a final word as well, is that I understand wanting to find as many ways as possible to combat evil, but we cannot overcome evil with evil, as Romans 12 says. And so, again, and we can have that conversation, me, you, and Hody, at some point. But, while I have strong convictions about certain things being sinful, you will never overcome sin with more sin and more evil. And at this point right now, um, I'm sorry, the culture war stuff, that is the bottom priority for me right now. The bottom priority. I voted for Trump because maybe it was a foolish thing, but I thought that it was the best chance for us to de-escalate global conflict and move more towards peace. And not only did he live down to that, but he's gone below that. And we're escalating conflicts even more than we were under Kamala and Biden. So it's a disaster. And we as Christian, my plea to Christians and libertarians is, we can, there's three paths ahead of us. We can try to excuse things to the point where we don't course correct. We can say, woe is us and give up, or we can just dust ourselves up, get up, admit where we got some things wrong, celebrate the good things that might have happened, and we got to keep up the good fight. So that's my closing thoughts. Jeremiah, anything you want to close with before we hop off?
Yeah, I'll just say, and I'll attempt to keep this brief. The thing is, I do assign malice when other people assign ignorance. I believe firmly that there's quite a bit of malice in quite a bit of the actors present here, and that they wanted the other side purged so badly that they were willing to take ethical shortcuts. And this is true in the Republican Party, obviously, but it's also true in the Libertarian Party. Like anybody who doubts this at this point, that the Libertarian Party was involved in a significant amount of fraud, that there was some stuff that should not have been going on, that was like some companies that were set up with the basically explicit purpose of funneling things around, that there was like basically gamesmanship, that there was the money never should have shuffled to RFK to begin with, that the Trump administration was never going to give us any sort of actual real world tangible stuff. Like here's the thing. The enemy of our enemy can be our enemy. And that's a thing that so many people need to understand. Like the fact that, here's the thing. You can say it's really good that Ross got free. And you're not wrong. It should have happened a long time ago. But it should have happened because the war on drugs is bullshit.
Yeah.
It should have happened because it should have been ended. And instead of that, the war on drugs is now being ramped up with international threats. The war on drugs is being ramped up with threats to drone Mexico, with threats to go to war with Central and South American countries, with threats to go to international trade wars because fentanyl, and China's bringing the fentanyl, even though they're, doing that primarily through actual points of entry, and it's primarily Americans smuggling it in, and it's primarily not going to be stopped by any of these controls to begin with. Like, we're dealing with fundamental flaws in actual reasoning to come to the conclusion that this is anything short of locking up a ton more people like Ross. Because here's the thing. If your worst allegation is that somebody sold some drugs, there was one of these people who got arrested, and then immediately people are like, "Ooh, he has a weed charge on his record." Who cares? That should never have been a thing on any free-thinking person's radar, but it was, because that's how you can get this legal out. That's how you can get this legal out of this country, as he was on weed at one point, allegedly. And this idea that Ross Ulbricht is somebody to hold up as an example of the freedom of the Trump administration, when he is locking up so many other people for basically the same stuff that Ross was locked up for, is absurd. It is an abrogation of duty. It is like libertarians getting off the steering of the ship and handing it to somebody else. And as long as one wave was avoided, as long as one wave was avoided. You can ignore the fact that this storm is destroying the ship. And meanwhile, Ted Kaczynski wrote a nice little screed on this, a nice little essay. It was a version of an existing thing called A Ship of Fools. And everybody should read that because it's basically a descriptor of what's going on today. It's so many people on so many of these little pet issues, these little single issues, like growing these alleged coalitions to solve the problems, but the primary problems are still here. The ship is heading toward that iceberg, and we are bickering on the deck about all these little tiny things, and also like finding minorities to blame, finding boogeymen to assault, finding people that can be deported, finding people that can be jailed, finding people that can be beaten, can be tracked, can be isolated, can be blamed. But the real people to blame are the people in charge. The real people to blame are the people who run this. And those people are not stopping running this because Trump is in charge. They're just being more open about it and less conciliatory. They never cared about wokeism. They never cared about pride. They never cared about your minority status. You were somebody that they could put on an ad so that it would make it seem more inclusive, so that more people in your demographic absorbed the performative wokeness and bought their product or signed up to their agency, even if it's the Central Intelligence Agency. I'm so glad that somebody of minority status is the one doing torture programs and droning people. It's such a good thing.
It's
So like,
literally the meme about the bombs have rainbow flags on them.
yeah.
Right.
And so like, what you need to understand is everything can be co-opted. Everyone is subject to propaganda. Everyone can be manipulated. Everything can be tainted. If you're a Christian out there, there are demons everywhere. There are demons in your church. There are demons in your politicians. There are demons everywhere. And unless you're willing to actually fully test the powers and principalities and the spirits as they are, you are subject to their power. And you need to understand that because we are dealing with fundamentally evil forces that have already shown themselves historically to align themselves against the human spirit and liberty in every single iteration they've had.
Yeah. You know, that passage, you know, we don't struggle against flesh and blood, but against uh you know, darkness and for principalities and things like that. You know, I anyway, that's a conversation for another day, but it does make me wonder how much of the solution involves politics at all. But
There is
again,
no political solution.
I know I kind of set you up for that, but that's a conversation we still need to have at some point. So we'll definitely will do so. Jeremiah, I enjoy our talks. I know there's a small subset of my audience that thinks you're a communist or doesn't like you, but I don't think you're a communist. And I think that even where I disagree with you, I appreciate your perspective, and I'm always happy to have you on the show. People can follow you on X at Insanity is Free, and check that space out tomorrow. I might try to attend if I have time. Um,
Absolutely. And these
uh,
spaces, by the way, are open conversations. They're sort of round table group panels, and I try to involve as many different voices as possible. And if you can only come in on like, a part of it, you are free to come in on a part of it and drop out. They're usually about 2 hours, and they're called anti-spaces. Anyone who wants to look up the old ones can look up anti-spaces on my in a Twitter search.
awesome. Alrighty. Well, yeah, everyone make sure follow Jeremiah. Make sure that you follow me at Biblical Anarchy. Like this video wherever you're watching it, whether it's on YouTube or if you're listening to the audio later. Give a 5-star review. Subscribe if you haven't already. And you could, of course, check out more at libertarianchristians.com. But that's all I have for you guys for tonight. I don't have any more planned live streams right now, but make sure, again, you're subscribed and you'll get notified as soon as those are put into motion. Other than that, live at peace and live for Christ. Take care.